Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience episode number 491. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black Entrepreneur Experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, and innovative thinkers and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Our next guest is founding partner and CEO at Myosin Marketing, a full-service growth marketing accelerator combining data artistry, precision science, and human-focused storytelling to help businesses achieve exponential growth. Welcome, Sean Clayton.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much, Dr. Francis. It's wonderful to meet you.
I've given our audience such a brief bio, but you have an amazing, not only bio. I would like you to fill in the gaps, share with our audience what you want them to know about your businesses and about you.
I'll start with the business side because that's what we're probably all here for. And then I can talk a little bit, depending on how vulnerable you want me to go, I can go super deep into the trenches of Sean Clayton. But my business is we have a full service marketing agency. Now there's a lot of those out there, so that's not overly exciting when you first hear it. But what is exciting is how we approach our business and the way that we actually built this business from, I call it a happy accident, but there are no accidents in the universe. So my background, I started many moons ago in like the medical staffing world, had some really, and I'm actually probably going to go into just me right now, had some really challenging things happen to where I ended up being incarcerated for 3.5 years. In that window of incarceration is actually where I learned a lot of my life's most valuable lessons. And it set me on a different trajectory to where I had to do a lot of inner work. I had to learn how to become a man of integrity, a person that had courage, a person that moved in love, and how to redefine abundance in my life. And when I took those action steps and I started to look at the world differently, and I had an opportunity to reinvent my life. When you get out, there's only a few jobs you can get. You can like drive a truck, you could be a trainer, it's like janitorial, like here's your list, go for it. I ended up working at a car dealership. And when I was there, I saw how the dealerships were being run and managed, and that they had this, at the time, it was almost 15 years ago, these internet marketing departments. And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. And I learned how to do that really well. I learned about Google Ads and marketing and how to drive to landing pages and became very good at it and started to become the top salesperson for Volkswagen for about 6 to 8 months. I didn't stay there too long because I got quickly recruited out into the agency world. People were seeing what I was doing, and I was selling 50, 100 cars a month and making really good money. And then I got recruited to go do this professionally inside of the agency world, in the walls of like Omnicom, WPP, like some of these major agencies is where I got pulled into, in some ad tech world. And ad tech is, for those that don't know, is all the creepy ads that kind of follow you around the internet, right? That stuff. And like how they understand all the nuances about you and like, oh, is my phone listening to me? That type of thing. So I learned how to do that, which was pretty cool. And when I got into WPP, which is actually the world's largest agency, they run about $64 billion of media per year. My clients escalated from it being car dealerships to Facebook and Google and Nike and Unilever and Rolex and like all these cool brands. And so when I was there, I started working in this group called the NeuroLab. And the NeuroLab takes these EEG, which is like brainwave analysis, and it helps you understand more about when somebody's reading words or engaging in colors or on an ad platform, how their brain is responding. They call the brain is a wonderful instrument, but a horrible master, right? Because we get caught in our thoughts and whatnot. We were able to see when people were in their sympathetic nervous system or in their fight, flight, hide, or freeze, or when they were triggering off a dopamine response and becoming addicted, like the things we get all concerned with about Instagram and people getting hooked into it, and how to break them away from that, and what language to use inside of ads, what colors stimulated certain ethnicities. And so you could start to see these really interesting patterns arise from types of demographics and individuals and behaviors. In the middle of, actually, like right when Black Lives Matter started, right at the kind of top of COVID, I went out and jumped into doing my own agency work. And at that time, it was a really big risk because nobody was spending money on marketing. And so they're like, well, Sean, what are you doing? But what I learned is that there's an energy of what I call supply and demand in the world. And when you start to evaluate that moment, there was a really big demand. And I think we all saw it in DE&I initiatives. And I'm going to call it quickly, like kind of this guilt, the white guilt that persists, after Black Lives Matter. And it's like, well, could I go out and ask for the same deals I get at this big agency on my own? Could I go out and position myself in front of certain clients that probably would have told me no before that I'll actually have a shot in the room at? And I did that and it worked. Started my own agency in that window of time, took that opportunity and left. And the wind of the world started to carry me and carry the agency. And we were small at the time, a couple people, but we went after it. And now we're about 25 individuals. We really reinvented ourselves because we would kind of take any client that was coming at that time. It was like, hey, just sell, 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 and get in front of whoever we could with big budgets. And now it's less about the big budgets and more about the big hearts. When we started to reestablish our values and change who we were from the inside out, and really a lot of the principles that I learned when I was in being incarcerated, or when I chose to put myself in that space to free myself, is what I call it. Having an agency of integrity and action, making sure that we move with redefined courage, challenging each other in love, and moving in holistic abundance. The agency really started to reinvent itself. And, the type of clients that we bring on are clients that stand for those same values. They have a truly courageous heart and an intrinsic, they might not always be, like we have one client that the helicopter taxi company in New York, but the founders has the biggest heart in the world. The CMO is all about consciousness and making sure that they move in those spaces. And so even though they are flying helicopters back and forth to the airport, they also are looking to do a lot of good in the world. For us, it's not necessarily we're challenging and checking our clients to do these things. It just seems as though, and it's no accident, that when we show up that way, they show up that way. We truly do believe in energy as a leader and moving in the vibrations of what's around us. And I know it sometimes sounds a little bit woo-woo for some people, but it's just been too obvious. And the amount of abundance, and we call monetary success, client success, and the ease of work of being able to move in that path has been wildly rewarding for us. So that's Myas in a nutshell. The action steps that we do on a daily basis: we run digital marketing. We buy large TV out of home. We do awesome branding for our clients, creative work, brand narratives, storytelling, videography, social media management. So, kind of everything growth marketing wise under the sun of marketing, but it's all about taking those principles and bringing them into those apparatuses instead of being really good at those and not really knowing where your values stand.
Thank you for that. Do you take clients all over the world, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I would say it's like US, North American, some South American based, but we do take clients all over the world. We have a couple of clients in Europe. We do have some work that we do over in Asia as well, but predominantly, I'd say 90% of our clients are actually in the US.
Advice, Sean, you wish you had followed.
I look at the world a little bit uniquely. Everything when I back test my life, right? And so I go back and I look at everything that ever happened. And everything had to happen for me to know what I know now. So if I were to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. But if I were to say, wake up sooner to the fact that you truly are the cause creator of your life. And when I recognize and what that means for me and anybody that might be kind of on that path of listening, is that you're not a victim. There's nothing outside of you that is not a reflection of the truth that lives inside of you. Okay. And so when you truly know yourself and know who you are and can love who you are, then the world will love you back. But when you're constantly chasing after some external affirmation or trying to validate somebody else's world or becoming part of their system, then you are not aware of yours and the foundation that you set, whether it's in your personal life, in your business life, in your spiritual life. It doesn't really matter where. You don't know that. You don't know yourself. That is the baseline for me of being able to set up what I call is like that foundation of the pyramid. Because if you don't have those stones in place, then you really have everything topples over, no matter what part of your life that you're in. So if I could have done that sooner, that would have been the thing. But I also recognize that where I'm at now, I had to go through all of those things. I had to go through all those trials to even have that type of foundation set. And the most important moment of my life is right now.
What is your zone of genius?
So my zone of genius, I would say, is strategic thinking and being able to see around the corner. And I think there's not even I know there's two different types of strategic thinking. There's futurist strategic thinking, and then there's wisdom strategic thinking. Mine leans into integrating wisdom of different experiences of people of what they've gone through in the past. So I can take somebody's experience and then help them baseline that to where it feels like that's their future state, but it's less of that being their future state. It's more about here's the things that you've been through because we've all been through some stuff. Here's the patterns that have come up, and I can identify those patterns very quickly. I can understand how those patterns neurologically affect individuals. And for me, it's being able to take that experience of what I've learned and what I call use a little bit of science and a little bit of artistry to break that down for clients so that they can find a way into their success. Once you start to do that, magical things start to happen because you're removing the heaviness of what I would consider hope and hope, I'll talk a little bit about this, but hope and expectations into agreement and knowing. The difference is that expectations are, I hope this thing's going to happen. I'm putting my assumptions on it, and I'm not actually really grounded in what that looks like. And knowing is this is exactly what we're going to do, and we're going to set up agreements to get that done. And we're going to do that based on all of the evidence that has led us to this moment. But we're going to look at it very subjectively through the lens of the values that we stand for. So the lens of integrity, the lens of courage, the lens of love, and the lens of abundance. And when you do that, the entire apparatus starts to change strategically for our clients.
What problem exists in the world today that you'd like to solve?
We're solving it. Self-love. That is very a non-business thing for a lot of individuals, but most of us don't realize how to love ourselves and really what love really means. We've put the concept of love in a bucket of what we've been taught, of what our parents have showed us that what that looks like. And sometimes that's a version of it, but it's like sometimes trauma patterns that bring that thing into life of what success looks like. And oftentimes that's not success for everybody. So allowing people to remember their freedom, how that persists itself through a concept of finding that freedom within and then using that as a baseline for love and then infusing that everywhere in their life. So it's not just you do this at home, but you do this everywhere.
And something that you had said, I'm going to step back a second, which is, I believe, is going to parlay into self-love. But when you were talking about really finding yourself and knowing yourself,
yeah,
someone's listening and say, how did you get to that point? Or how do I get to that point?
That's a great question. I generally just use an example of something like my phone. When you know yourself, here's my phone here, right? And on my phone, what you see, if I take this on the front of my phone, you see this side of it. I'm sitting on the other side of it and I see the back of it, which looks like this. So everybody's perception of you is depending on how they view you. The only person that knows everything about this phone is this phone. It knows the circuits inside of it. It knows the applications on every single page that are in it. It knows what cards are in order in the card slot in the back, the positioning of it. If there's dirt underneath the cover, it knows all these things about itself. And when it really knows itself, it goes on the journey to figure out what's wrong and what's right. Because I say there's no wrong or right. But where are all of the efficiencies and inefficiencies, the harmonies and the disharmonies that live inside of it? And what it does when it knows itself is on a constant seeking journey to make sure that whoever is viewing it that says, hey, you've got some dirt on your screen. It's like, oh, you know what I do? And they take responsibility for that dirt, right? And they do the work to clean that dirt off. Or, oh, my program is running a little bit slow, and somebody gives them that feedback. Everything in the world is giving us feedback for what we are. And oftentimes they say, well, I met a narcissist, or I met somebody who's judging me, or I don't like that feedback, or that's not who I think I am. Well, you're not getting that feedback if there isn't something a little bit off. And sometimes it's their story, but oftentimes we create that story from our story. So there's no accidents in it. So the opportunity of knowing yourself is being able to take radical responsibility for you and who you bring into your life. If you constantly have people that are gossiping, well, there's something inside of you that is unaware of you, right? You're gossiping within yourself, honestly. If you have narcissists everywhere in your life, well, there's something about you that needs that healing. And you might be like, well, hey, I'm going to be a victim of this, or I can go out and I can figure out how to fix that. And generally, when you know yourself well enough, you start setting up agreements to fix those relationships in your life, not to change them, but to change you of how they respond to you. So you establish boundaries. You make sure that you're walking in integrity. You become unmoved. I always use certain faith concepts, not because I'm wildly religious, but more in the capacity as examples because we know what they are. But you take the story of, Yeshua, Christ, right? And this person knew himself so much that he could put himself on the cross in the concept of judgment where he could have folded to other people's expectations. And that whole concept in itself is an example of how we can move through life when we know ourselves so well that we're willing to, not to say go out and throw yourself on a cross and die for anything, but you're willing to take the judgment, take the criticism, recognize that as part of your journey, and then infuse that back out into the world. So that's how you know yourself, is wild self-discovery, taking every version of criticism that you get, embracing that, and understanding that it is a alchemy process for you to be able to impact those outside of you.
And you talked about the self-love. And when you talk about a lot of individuals, they don't really understand or know self-love or think they're practicing self-love. How would you define self-love?
We have to start with love first, and then we go to self. So the concept of love is not what we think it is. It is a vibration. It's an energy that is present in everything, that is constantly looking for full harmony and what we call coherence. It's looking for that synchronous vibration that allows everybody to feel like they're winning. And oftentimes we say, well, love has these conditionalities. Well, if I love you, I'm going to do something. If I love you, this is what it's going to be. If I love you, I'm going to show up at this specific time, those types of things. That's generally how we've been taught love is. Then we put all this judgment on love, and love has no judgment. It's just justice. Love has no righteousness, right? It has none of those things associated with it. It's just about balance. So when we're looking at the concept of love, shame has love in it. Fear has love in it. Anger has love in it. All these things have love in it. And our thing is to take those different feelings and emotions and move them to these more harmonious vibrations so that we can experience life in a more balanced state. So that's the love aspect. We don't have that understanding of love, then the self-love thing is constantly confusing because I'm looking at the world, which is not self. The world is the outside of me. And then I'm measuring that off of love, and then we keep getting lost because I'm asking for everybody else for what their definition is. And then I'm changing myself, code switching, right, to everybody else's version of love. And then I don't know me. So once I understand love, it starts within. And then at which point I'm constantly going within myself to sit with myself. And what I always say is the fastest path that I got to it was taking total responsibility for everything in my life. So whether it was, I can go into deeper, darker aspects of, well, not darker, but just more challenging aspects. I was sexually abused as a youth. And I talk about that openly, like on my podcast, or I talk about that in the world because it's something that people don't really discuss. And I know we're on a business podcast, but moreover, being able to have that vulnerability gives me strength. It helps me understand, like, why did I create that situation for me to love myself now? Now, it doesn't mean that it was righteous what that person did. It means that I had to go through that to become as whole as I could possibly be and learn that I can love everything that ever existed, no matter high or low, good or bad, whatever we put judgment on that is. And then I take responsibility for that. And I'm no longer looking at my assailant with that level of judgment. I've let that go and I've accepted it because I don't want to live in that trauma anymore. I choose not to live in that trauma. And then the love of myself starts to permeate and it starts to affect everything in my life. And when you can do that with those really traumatic things that happen that we judge, it's very simple to do them across business. It's very simple to do them in your relationships. And so all of these, I call them spiritual bodybuilding exercises that you go through to figure out how strong you could build your aura, how big you can build that spiritual body so that you could take on any challenges of the world. And, I'll say this as Black people who have been ostracized and judged and just put down societally, generationally, we have really strong spiritual bodies that we can tap into. And when we can tap into that spiritual, that energetic body by learning to take love for our trauma and responsibility, not in the way that we quote responsibility, but our ability to respond to it in a loving way, we become unstoppable. And this is gifts that we give in ourselves that we are not aware that we constantly have. Instead of playing victim to the past, we become fluid alchemists of this, magicians of it. And then the world is like, oh, well, this doesn't make any sense, but I have to learn to love it. This is why when we step into that, we become like wildly magical. the Kobe Bryants of the world, the Obamas of the world, the Michael Jordans, you name it. Like we just start taking over stuff and it becomes really interesting, the Oprahs and whatnot.
You mentioned your podcast. Tell us about your podcast and how can they listen?
Yeah, yeah. So I have two doors people go through. I have one called Science of Abundance, it's Daily Alchemy, and it's a podcast where I talk about principles like this, how it applies to overcoming traumatic patterns, how to look at different areas of your life through what I just call not mysticism, but more just magical ways of looking at the world. Because we have logical ways of looking at the world. There's either logic or magic, and we have magical ways of looking at it. And magic just means I move away from a linear path into a curve of space and time, and I'm able to use my spirit to infuse into reality. I have my Instagram channel, which is Abundance 10,000, where I talk about these principles in a video format and walk people through that ecosystem, and been a nice healing journey for individuals. And then inside of that, there's also spiritual coaching that we walk individuals through that is very much so tied to integrated practices. It's not some woo-woo thing. It's like, oh, this is how you see the code of your life, action on it. We hold each other accountable. And we've seen a lot of great growth within that.
Thank you for sharing that. There are so many brands and businesses that are dominating. Speaking of marketing, talk
Yes.
about a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire and why.
Yeah, I'll say Apple. They're a very magical brand. They went from being a design to like technology to a design brand. And now they're becoming really a wellness and lifestyle brand. They have, for the longest time, they were getting people hooked to the addiction of their phone. And now they recognize like, hey, this is not something that we can keep people on the path of doing anymore. And they're very much so tied into, your wellness and cognitive balance and how to help individuals, break away from the program and become true arbiters of their privacy, those types of things. So it's really cool seeing the maturation of Apple from where it was dominating, owning consumer data, and then keeping people trapped at what I call is a vicious loop of, hey, you got to stay on this thing, versus them now being truly a lifestyle brand, caring about the wellness, caring about the hearts of individuals, understanding those nuances and giving people back their self-agency. So it's cool to see they're not there yet, but they're on the way, which is cool to watch them do that.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Sean, I want you to have a monologue. I want you to name this person, living or not. They've impacted
Mhm.
you so much. Who is
Mm.
that person? And what are you saying to that person?
The person that this is going to be an interesting one. All right. It's my 9-year-old version of me. And we could take another version of this if you like. But the reason that I say that is that was a young man or young boy who he was learning life. He had stepped into some really traumatic situations. He survived those situations despite what the world was telling him about himself. Growing up, he wasn't black enough. He was made fun of because of the kind of hair on his head. He talked a little funny to all of his friends. At that moment in time, he, went through bouts of sexual abuse. His father wasn't around a lot. He saw his mother going to the store, having to steal milk just to feed us, that type of thing. And yeah, through all of that, fought like crazy to become resilient enough to do all he could to become a great athlete when he as great as he could possibly be, despite his circumstances and challenging issues, to fight his way through the education system that he didn't feel confident and comfortable in, to overcome depression and attempts at his own life that could have taken him at any given point, and even fought through the prisons that he kept himself in order to wake up one day and recognize that he hasn't arrived, but that journey that he went on was one of true resilience and true fortitude. And there's all of the examples of individuals, whether it's the Dr. Martin Luther King to watching individuals like Obama, and then when you see all those examples that you do look up to, you also recognize that there's a part of you that created a version of them to remember who you are. And so for that 9-year-old Sean, who had to truly fight his way to get to a point of feeling free, remembering what freedom looks like, and walking in that every single day. I commend him for not giving up and for going through the trials and the traumas that he had to go through in order to love himself.
Thank you for that. Sean, I want
Yeah.
to you for truly your transparency, your authenticity, and your honesty, just being so vulnerable and open. And so I thank you for doing the work around just sharing what you went through as a young boy. And don't know if it's fitting to say, I'm sorry that you went through that as a young boy, but even when you are so authentic about even being incarcerated. I
Mhm.
want you to speak to someone out there and they are feeling what you're saying. They are in it. They're feeling like they have no hope. They are struggling with some things. What advice would you give them?
For each, when you feel like you have no hope, I always say imagine a trampoline and you jumped into the trampoline because part of you knew you had to jump. It might not have been a part that you were aware of, but it's part of you that knew you had to jump. And when you hit that trampoline and it sinks down, that feels like no hope. You've intended to jump, you intended to go higher. And it's a moment in time. It's not all of time. It's just a moment in time where it's down. And that moment of downness also, because this world is elastic, this world will bounce you back, this world will never give you more than you can handle. And I know they say that a lot, and then we're like, oh, this keeps beating me down. The only reason that I would say stuck down on the bottom of that trampoline when I jumped is because I didn't remember to come back up again. I put too much weight on my shoulders, and I put more weight than that trampoline could hold. And that weight that we carry when we jump, oftentimes we just have to let go of it. We have to shed that layer. And for any of us that are feeling like we're stuck at the bottom of the trampoline, or every time I jump, I don't bounce back up again, we've got to get the monkeys off our back, the weights off our back, all of the things that we've carried with us. And just that moment of freedom, that breath that you can take, that ability to just be still for a second will shed all of that off of you. And then you'll jump, you'll fly. For me, what I do is whenever I feel like I'm lost, the one thing that I have that keeps me alive, that I have, we can call it control, or that I can really influence, is my breath. So I just take some breaths. Like I'll do 3 deep breaths. And within those 3 deep breaths, I know it sounds like, oh, breathe, but it really is, when you're intentional with your breathing, you all of a sudden kind of just go through the process of snapping back into something that feels very divine, that feels very magical. And then you shed it, and then you look at it and you start to accept everything in your life. You like look at the moment, you'll be like, oh, I accept that. And then the other thing that I do is I'll write down, and this is an exercise I go through, 32 reasons why I created whatever that moment is to love myself more. And it could be anything like, hey, my wife or my husband yelled at me. Well, why did I create that to love myself more? What did I need to learn in that moment of opportunity? And whenever I go through that, it gives me an answer that really starts to define most moments in my life. And so for those that feel like they are lost, do that exercise because it'll help. Start to just become aware of your breath, because we breathe mindlessly, but it's something you can breathe up and slow down. And know that when you take that jump, because you jumped for a reason, you don't know why sometimes, release the things that have held you down, take a little bit of the weight off, and you'll at least jump a little bit. And as you start moving up that trampoline a little bit and jumping a little bit, that space that you gain will start to become the thing that feels like less hope and just more knowing. And when you step into that knowing, you're no longer a believer. You just are the creator of your life. And it does start to change the way you show up, because then you start to attract a different level of abundance and energy towards yourself.
How do you make impact daily?
Daily, as integration is a really big thing for me. You can have all the intention in the world and do nothing about it. So for me, being able to integrate that from action steps, it's whenever I'm on phone calls with individuals, I'll tell them, thank you and I love you. Right. And they're like, what do you mean you love me? And it's like, well, I love you because, yeah, I love myself. And so, giving individuals that level of energy back, being patient with everybody that I show up in life. At Myosin, we constantly have a give back strategy. So we're taking the profits and the revenue that we get, and we learn to just give that back to different initiatives and nonprofits that need it, or underrepresented founders, or taking on a client that people have not taken because they didn't have enough money to come at them, and doing pro bono work things along those lines. And so we'll integrate that into action steps along those ways. And then we'll see that little client that nobody believed in it all of a sudden become, we had one that became $8 million a month in revenue, right? In a year. It was crazy watching that happen. And so knowing people's hearts and leaning into that instead of judging them for how big your pocketbook is, the fancy things that you say, when you could do that, you make a massive impact in the world because you see the soul of somebody as you see yourself.
Talk about your top two influencers or mentors. Some people call them influencers, some call them mentors. What lessons did they teach you?
I have two types on this. One that taught me what not to do, and then those that taught me what to do. So I have probably one very close friend in my life right now. We're a similar age bracket. We started working together, but I consider him a mentor. He is just very deliberate and does not hesitate with his actions. So he moves through life without hesitation. And there's such a defined knowing in that when you watch it, it's like, oh, with a meeting supposed to end, it ends and he goes. Like if it's, he says he's going to do something, it gets done, right then and there. Like it's not a question of if this person is going to do something or not do something. And I've watched him action in life, and it's been really beautiful of the broken parts of me, if I were to call them that, or the pieces that were a little bit fractaled, bringing those into harmony for myself through watching what he was doing. The other, I'd say another mentor that I have right now that I really look up to is an individual who has helped me see my blind spots, because I've always been a really strong strategist and somebody that's a dreamer and an imaginer, but somebody that can truly integrate that operationally on a daily basis into business and even just in the practices that I do. Never did that before. So watching somebody truly with operational efficiencies lean into that so that you can navigate this world that we're in, but that do it from your space of authenticity without losing yourself was very critical. And over the last, I'd say, year and a half, it's expanded how my essence shows up in the world, how I show up in the world, and the rest of our team.
Talk about love, marriage, and entrepreneurship.
They're all very connected. It's funny. My wife and I are business partners, and she is my great intuitor. She can see the future around the corner, things that I have no idea that are coming. And she's like, no, we shouldn't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? It feels like so right. And having that kind of relationship, and whether your spouse works with you or not, you both have strengths. You both have this covenant that allows you to take those individual strengths and build something really miraculous in your life. And for me, whether you work with your spouse or your loved one or not, being able to lean into their strengths and their gifts and bring vulnerably things that are going on, and not to just like bring your day and say, here's all the things that are wrong. But for me, it was, even when her and I didn't work together, I was bringing her like, hey, here's kind of what's going on in my life. And she would show me things that I couldn't see. Being able to lean into her gifts and then integrating that into my workspace from an entrepreneurial perspective gives me a lot of confidence, because she really helps me establish that baseline that no matter what kind of business partner you have, no matter, the type of team that you have, there's nobody that's going to know you like the loved one in your life, like your spouse. And they can help hold you accountable to a different level of integrity that in business you can't. And when you can bring that into your business, and as an entrepreneur, where that a lot of times is most of our life, those things merge together and it really becomes a beautiful healing journey that doesn't disconnect the two. And you actually have a really beautiful work-life balance in that process.
Shauna, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
These are great questions, by the way. You are pushing
was
me.
Not paid to say that.
I was not paid to say that. No. Oh man, what question would I ask myself? You asked so many wonderful questions. I would say this: what keeps people from being successful? Like, what do you feel like is the one thing that keeps an entrepreneur from being successful? And I would say the one thing that keeps entrepreneurs, whether man or woman, from being successful is their relationship with feminine energy. And what I mean by this is it's not just what feminine, first let me define what feminine energy is, and then I'll say what that relationship looks like. So feminine energy is something that as humanity, we have been very far away from. We've been very patriarchal. We've been very misogynistic. We've been very go get. We've been very go take. And we've been forcing agendas. And we feel like we have to move really quickly through the world. And we're at a moment in time now where if we haven't noticed it, there's like this feminine energy that's much different. Like in movies, the Black Panther went from being masculine to feminine. Right? You see even the presidential race, like it's shifting. You see this difference in how feminine energy is showing up in the world. And truly what feminine energy is this concept of receivership. It is having an aspect of strength to be able to hold what you receive. It's being able to see intuitively what's coming around the corner, right? And it's being able to actually surrender, and not surrender in a space of weakness, but surrender to a space of strength and vulnerability so that we can accept all that's happening in our lives from a position of love. When we don't have that energy inside of us, what it'll end up happening is if I can't receive from a feminine energy perspective, then all of this abundance that's pouring all over us all the time, it just fades away, right? For the longest time when I didn't have that, I would have something hit me in my hands and it would fade away. It's like you see this in entrepreneurship all the time. It's like you get something and then you can't keep it. It comes and it goes. By having that adjusted relationship with feminine energy to be able to learn how to receive, and generally that shows up in the avatars in our life. As a man, it's like, hey, if I don't have a great relationship with my mother, and great just means like I honor and respect what that looks like. It doesn't mean I have to call my mom every single day, but it means that when I'm with her, I'm present, I'm taking the time, and I'm no longer living in that trauma. Or my sister, or my friends, or my wife, or my daughter, whatever it might be. If I'm out there gallivanting around and cheating or anything like that, my entrepreneurship journey is going to be very broken because I'm not in integrity of the ability to receive even just the beautiful avatars of the females in my life, much less what's in myself. And as a woman, it's being able to truly receive your strength, being able to walk in that aspect of empathy, being able to know that that's a gift and be able to really lean into your intuition. And also in the relationships in your life, from a feminine perspective, how those show up. Oftentimes it requires some aspect of safety for that to be there, but all of that is extremely important for us to be successful entrepreneurs, because if we don't have that container, then no matter what abundance comes in, it's like a cup with a lid on it. It just is going to hit and pour over the top. It doesn't build.
We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Rapid Round of Fun. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to give me very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready?
Okay.
Rapid round of
I'm
fun.
ready.
What is your favorite comfort food?
Pasta.
The last movie you saw?
It was the Wolverine and Deadpool movie.
You relax doing what?
Meditating.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
Michael Jackson.
Your favorite dance song?
Rock With You, A Pretty Young Thing by Michael Jackson. Yeah.
Food you eat every week, no matter what?
This protein shake, I eat it every day, no matter what. Just fuels me.
Your ideal car?
Brand wise, Mercedes would be the brand car that I drive. Yeah.
Work out or hit the couch?
Work out.
Sean Clayton, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you, do business with you, and feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Yeah, for sure. So best way to work with us would be myosin, myosin.io. Come to our agency website. You can see about all of our services. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just type in Sean Clayton. I think I'm the guy doing this with his face, like Home Alone. You can also connect with me on scienceofabundance.ai. It's my spiritual coaching, abundance practice coaching space. Abundance 10,000 is my social media handle on Instagram. And you can go there, do a little bit on TikTok, but not much. I'm just not that cool yet. And then I have some YouTube stuff up as well. Same Abundance 10,000 channel as well. So that's the way to connect with me.
Thank you, Sean. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.